Another significant time waster, and therefore a waster of money, is poor IT. Computers have just become more and more vital to every business. They're an increasing cost, they're getting more and more sophisticated, and I just think there's so much bad IT everywhere I go. I've done quite a lot of work for the National Health Service, for example, and it's just, it would cost a lot for them to have brilliant IT, but on the other hand, the amount of time that gets wasted because of their IT systems, and I'm sure everybody who works there would agree that, we really perhaps should do something about that. So if you measure the biggest time wasters, I bet IT will be one of them. And if you just sit and observe a person trying to work, have a look at whether the IT gives them what they want. I think it's a massive hidden cost. I've booked into hotels and the woman's typing away and she takes ages. And in the end, I say, "You're right." And she goes, "Oh, it's this new system they've given us. It's hopeless." And I'm thinking, well, what are you doing? And maybe it gives more information to management, but they don't realize how much extra time it's taking at the front line. So just watch somebody work. It's a massive hidden cost. Maybe they've got the old version of Windows, maybe they've got a really old laptop or no laptop, so they have to sit and write a load of notes and later on they type it in. Maybe they could be given an iPad and it would just be instant, but they haven't got one. Quite often people have really old phones or really bad, cheap phones. For the sake of saving £10 a month on your phone contract, they've given you some rubbish company phone. So maybe you've got your company phone and your personal phone, and that's just so wasteful. It's a tool of the trade, so you should give people a good phone. It's bound to save £10 a month to give them a good phone. Now, you're probably thinking, this is meant to be cost reduction, and you're saying spend more on a phone. But the point is, if the good phone makes that person more effective, you can do the job with fewer people, or you can do more with the same people. So give them a decent phone. Then maybe your company should have an app, so it's really streamlined and they can just scan the barcode or whatever it is. Maybe people haven't been trained, so they don't know how to use Excel. I remember when I first discovered pivot tables, it just blew my mind, because a pivot table can instantly do stuff that you could spend hours every week adding up your numbers, and the pivot table just does it. So first of all, have a look at pivot tables, but also, and by the way, if you don't know what they are, ask one of your colleagues who knows about Excel to show you a pivot table. It'll blow your mind. But more than that, is everybody trained to use Excel? Because you might as well get the most out of the system you've got. So I know IT may seem expensive, but you need it. It's one of the tools of the job. And the key is really to try to put some real costs to these things. So then you can be systematic about the trade-off between spending more on IT and saving time. So say that you lose an hour a week due to reduced efficiency because your IT is not brilliant. Would it be worth spending more money to get back that hour a week? So, it's a fairly easy calculation, isn't it? I would have thought, to just think, what's an hour a week costing me and what would be the cost of the IT? And you could do that. But actually, let's have a look at a slightly more sophisticated way to do this. Let's have a look at this graph. Now, don't panic, because this graph does look quite complicated. I'm actually going to explain it in more detail later on when we get to the cost of quality. But if we just have a quick look, this graph is the cost of IT. Okay? And if you look at it, we've got a thing called the failure cost, and we've got a thing called the prevention cost. And they add up to the total cost, which is U-shaped. Okay, so if you look at the prevention cost first, you can see that the amount you spend on IT could be from 20,000 up through 80,000, 160, 250 to 500,000. So you can see you could be spending more and more on making sure your IT is brilliant. And as you do that, the quality of the IT is going up from 1 all the way up to 9. And I've been calling it, Skoda and BMW and Ferrari quality, just as sort of a way to think about quality, okay? So you could be spending more and more on your IT. And why would you do that? And it's because your failure cost would reduce. So if you look at the failure cost graph, you can see when we've got really bad IT, we might be wasting 500 grand a year. And actually, when you do your calculation of hours, do you remember we did it for meetings earlier on? You could lose 500 grand a year because your IT's rubbish. That's just a few hours a week of wasted time. And as your IT improves, the failure costs go down to 400, 200, 150, and eventually down to 50. You're never going to get it down to zero. You're always going to have some failure costs. So if you look at those two graphs, if you add them up to get your total cost, which is the prevention cost plus the failure cost, you can see that we get a U-shaped curve. So with the really useless IT system, we've got a cost of 620,000, and it comes down to 480, and then the lowest is 360. That's the 200 plus the 160 where the lines are crossing over pretty much. And then it gradually goes up again, 400k and up to 550k. So you can see that having really brilliant IT would actually cost you more because it's really expensive to make it that fantastic. So the cheapest place to be is in the middle. The failure costs are things like a little bit of downtime or the system isn't perfect. So the first thing we learn from this is don't have rubbish IT because it costs you more, but also don't try to have perfect IT because that's going to cost you more as well. Now the final ingredient on this is it might be worth, in fact I think it is worth, going from 5 to 7. Because if you do that, clearly that you can see that the cost does go up a little bit, and that's because although the failure costs have come down a little bit, your prevention costs have had to go up. So the overall cost has gone up slightly, but the benefits have gone up as well. So you can provide a better service to your customers, you've got a more motivated workforce, your quality's gone up. So if you've got better IT, it enables a whole load of other great things to happen. And I think for the sake of that extra 40k, it could be worth it. There are diminishing returns though, so I don't think I'd go further on up from 7 to 9. So that's a way of thinking about it, and at the very least go for the minimum overall cost of your IT. Don't forget to factor in the failure costs. So you want to be at 5, not at 3 or 2. But I would suggest that actually it's worth going up to 7. So that's a scientific approach to looking at the cost of IT. And you could draw those graphs and you could put in your own numbers. Just do some rough estimates of how much would you have to spend to make your IT that good, and what would be the downtime that you're going to get still, even if your IT is really good. And just put some actual numbers, do some calculations for how many hours per person per week times the number of people. And then you can put real numbers in and you can make a scientific decision about how much you should spend on your IT.